or let me know if you've had one somewhere else, basically. And then what I did is I had each of the patient's names on a spreadsheet, and each time I heard from the patient something relating to this, I tracked it myself. Out of this, I found a lot of reasons why I didn't actually send them a letter. 6 of them were really too sick to screen. They were in that really high comorbidity group. Some of them, I'd given them stool cards like the day before. So things like that. So I only sent 33 letters out of the 72 charts. And so looking at this, we actually collected data on these 3 different types of letters. Okay, so we sent out 24 of the options letters, 24 of the like happy birthday you're 50 letters, and I sent out 33. And we actually looked at the cost per letter and what the results were. So for the one where we sent them stool cards, 1 person sent back the stool cards completed out of 24, okay? And 1 person scheduled a colonoscopy but didn't actually complete it. And then for the welcome to 50, again, 1 person scheduled a colonoscopy but didn't complete it. We actually looked like 6 months out, so we gave them pretty ample time. So no one got anything done based on this letter. Didn't work very well. And then my letter, I sent out 33. 5 of them completed screening. That could have been either did stool cards or a colonoscopy. And at the time that we looked, 2 were scheduled. And we actually looked at my screening rate. And between the time that I did this, I had an absolute increase in my screening rate by 9.5%. So really a big jump. So these letters came from me, from Dr. Ratner, saying you need to do this. So that really seemed to work quite a bit better than a centralized approach. We also I kind of talked about this direct scheduling, and so we set that up where basically patients would schedule from the front desk. We wouldn't let them leave without talking to GI, going through the questionnaire, and getting an appointment. And we sort of looked at the process map and said, well, we just cut out like 6 steps from the process, this complicated process, as sort of an intermediate thing that we could measure for this. And then we also did this where we sent out this provider level data to everybody over email. We shared it, we talked about it, and we really looked for what were these bright spots doing, who are these people at the top, and what are they doing right? And then the people at the bottom started asking, how can I do this better, and how can I get a better screening rate? And we did this for attendings and for residents, and it was very powerful. And almost everybody was completely positive about seeing this data and having it be very clear. And we actually looked at these are attendings and what their improvement was. And so you can see that these people with the stars next to them are actually people who did what I did. They on their own said, give me my list of patients who are due, and I'll send them letters. And those people did chart reviews. So you can see that was very powerful. The other 2 really big increases were people who were really at the bottom, so sort of that laggard effect that they had really big improvements. And so this is a really great thing to build when you do a QI project. So this is it. This is our screening rate, okay? So we started at 62.8, and over the process, what we did is we took each of our interventions, some of which I've told you about, and mapped them along the process. And you can just see that the level continued to rise. And this was where we actually got our residents to start sending letters out to their patients who were due, and you see that really steep rise. So I think this is, we always talk about building run charts, but this is don't just build a run chart, put what you did on it so that you know what was actually successful. And then, oh yeah.
How are you, logistically, how are you sending out the letters?
That's
are you like licking stamps?
No, yeah. So we did it in a few different ways. These ones that were like when they turned 50, we had like a front desk person. The ones we had to do folding envelopes for the ones that had stool cards in them. So those I put in there the expense. Those turn out to be a little bit more expensive because somebody in the clinic is literally stuffing these in by hand. The ones that we did, the provider ones, we built one template that everyone subscribed to, and so in WebSys it was through that patient correspondence, so it went out through what's called AccuDoc, so all the mailing and stuffing is done by like an external company. We just clicked a button. Now it's actually even simpler in Epic, and we're working on building some of these processes in Epic because you can actually do batch letters where you get a list and you don't even have to do it one at a time. You can say like send this letter to everyone on the list. So it's something that we're actually in process of refining how we do it to make it even less time intensive. It's a great question. So So basically, at the end of the project, we sort of built what's called a dashboard, which is where you put what your measures are over time and how you're going to look at them over time, and actually have shared what we've done with all of primary care at UNC, who are all adult primary care at UNC, who are now all kind of working on implementing all these same things. So that's what I have. The lessons, I learned a lot of lessons from this project, and I learned that this sort of centralized outreach might be simpler, but it doesn't seem to work as well. When it comes from the provider, it's more time intensive and potentially more expensive, so some of those logistics need to be worked out, but it seems to work better. It really worked well to work with GI and not have it be like us versus them, but to work together and to say, if we understand each other's processes, we can simplify this for the patient. The peer pressure worked, we sort of tried to map out, these are the things that you can do to get better, and educate our providers about that, and that helped too. But a big part of what we tried to do is make the system easier. So what questions do you guys have? You guys have been awesome in participating. So what questions or thoughts do you have? Yeah.
You might have said this, but did you do this stepwise, like one thing, then implement something else, then something else, or was it all together? And if it was all together, how did you discern what was helping what?
Yeah, so in some ways it was stepwise. We sort of rolled some of these out at different times. So this is where we started sending out the letters to people when they're turning 50, was in July. We got it took time and meetings to sort of get this rule changed in terms of 30 or 90-day cancellation. So that was a little later. That was in September. And some of what we do in quality improvement is we look at this. So what was most effective? Whatever we did here was most effective, right? And that's when we had all of our a huge population of providers all at the same time as a project, all doing these reviews of their patients who are due and sending out letters. So we do it by, so there are ways of looking at that on run charts that you can do sort of more scientifically in terms of like control charts, but you can also just look at that and eyeball it and say, well, whatever you did there is what worked. So.
Can I add that,
yeah.
Ideally you'd like to test things one at a time so you can see the effect. And sometimes there's interventions that actually work synergistically, and you might want to implement them together because they're dependent on one another. So it kind of depends on how you define the intervention, but sometimes you really do want to implement a multi-component thing at once, and then if it works, then you say, well, the multi-component thing worked. Now you need to unpack it and see which components of it actually did work.
And it also speaks to these process measures, right? So we, if you know what you're going to measure before you do something, sometimes you can get an early signal that something's not working. So even like a month into sending out these 50-year-old letters, we really weren't getting a lot of uptake, and we sort of made the decision, we're going to try this for this many more months to see. But you can see from both the run chart and the data that we collected on that particular intervention that it really was not very helpful. We also actually called patients and said, did you like getting this? And some of them said, don't call me. But a few of them said they loved it, and they said, oh, I always expect that you're going to send me a letter for something like this. So it can go both ways. But I think having some of those process measures helps you a little bit better if you are overlapping interventions, to be able to measure something about that, to know that it's an improvement. Great question. Yeah.
Getting back to Dr. Willis's point about sometimes it's harder to maintain something than to initiate something.
Yes.
I'm assuming the panel reviews next year aren't just going to be for colorectal cancer screening. So how can you move this forward indefinitely?
That's a great question. So the IHQI is supporting us in a grant to do that. So, I think we learned a whole lot from this project. And I think we really learned this idea that we want to take care of this population and not just people who end up showing up for visits for a routine follow-up that's not a cold, where we're going to address their prevention. What we learned here doesn't just hold for colorectal cancer screening. It holds for mammography, for pap smears, for all sorts of things. And so we really are trying to formalize our approach to outreach and to really set up standards that we're going to do outreach every 6 months and this is how it's going to look, and doing it the same every single time, so that it's not up to there being a QI project about it, but really becoming the standard of what we do in our work. So we are building all that out over the next year, and I'm really excited to see what it looks like. So,
I have a question.
yeah.
Oh, that was great. I appreciated it. But I have a question. How much does like something like this cost?
Yeah. In terms of doing